Happy there. Hello there, and happy Halloween and Day of the Dead. Was headed correct my spelling, but anyways, it was TE, not THE. No, it's corrected. Let's see how long it takes to get this going. What is this? What is that? Well, you don't really need that. That was the pre-baked orange thing. It is. Okay. Yes. Okay. Colon, forward slash, what was it again? Let's see now. Kiss.tech.tv4.com. Please do not take this down because the real life job application after having to explain about the last battle Leonidas. User ID, I don't know. Email address. My user ID. I don't know what my user ID. This is Fine Young Cannibals doing the song called She Drives Me Crazy. It's their official video. And let's see which channel this is. London Records, evidently. It's one of the ones that I subscribe to. It almost has 59,000 subscribers. His birthday. Okay. Let's try this again. I don't know if I can do this. I have to drive up to the college now. I don't even know how to do this. Come on. Just let me help a little. Call this number. That's nice. I don't want to call somebody. Messenger classes. Sign up for this. Right now. Well, I kind of can't do that very effectively yet. find it on your. I just ended up in one fun like people like it was like this scam. It was really confusing because whenever you answer, the first person on the phone is always for this job thing, right? Okay, so now you got this left driver job thing. Love it. Now after you got that, then you get put on this line. If you do, we found this out the first time. If you click for the rebate thing or whatever, so you can get $100 instant gift card or rebate or whatever, then you have to pay $2 if you really want it. If you want a job, you press pound, which will hang up the phone. If you do nothing, then they will hang up the phone for you. Let's see. I'm going to find it. Oh, maybe it's you talk too much. I might want to take that. There you go. Okay. So their thing does not work. They had one job, and that was make sure that their freaking instructions actually work right. They don't want to have to go out to the college at 11 in the morning. Well, basically 11 in the morning. It's 10:52 a.m. Yeah, I probably do talk too much. So do those scammer people. It's amazing how many different ways they have of letting you know that they really don't want to talk to you. Oh, and another thing, if you consider yourself a Spartan and you know about Spartan history, like ancient Spartas and ancient Greece, and you consider yourself a modern version of one of those, then then scammers like really hate you, especially if you know even like also know even like 50 words in Spanish or a foreign language. They will really hate you for that especially when you demonstrate that and you at random intervals pretending depending on who's calling you to be your secretary or whatever. Okay, we're playing Sparta War of Empires. Sorry I don't have the memory card or whatever for that. I don't even know where the heck my camera went. I don't like talking to those camera people. They're a pain in the rear, I'll tell you that much. They naturally upset me like my grandmother does sometimes. Like, she's a great person, but just don't live with her. Otherwise, you'll be better off talking to scammers like 12 hours a day. Trust me. You get more done in your life. Because then you wouldn't be spending the other 12 trying to regain your sanity. That's only slightly exaggerated. It's only slightly exaggerated, by the way. Here. And directions. Don't work. Sand. Probably should go down the park. Yeah, but who cares? Sorry about having the volume way too low until now. I'm in a bad habit of doing that, and I'm working on correcting that. But anyways. There we go. That's better. Oh, that's cool. My name is highlighted in yellow. Yeah, I like so awesome now. I could get a sentinel or something that has a yellow lightsaber. Well, I really need it. Yellow lightsabers. I also really need another crossguard lightsaber. That's okay. I have one. It just says this pro. Hi. Let me get my other lightsaber. Lightsaber. And don't demonetize me for this. Anyways, where is it? Now let's use my other one. So, like, you're fighting, and do this, and then I have to exaggerate this with this, this piece here, part of the crossguard, by the way. But now comes off, and now comes it down. Probably couldn't see that because of the poor camera quality. So now you have this problem. You now have it off balance. Do you have it off balance? supposed to be like this side over here, not like this. And then, now that you have enough balance, you can do this, turn the sound off, and then your training, your practice, whatever you want to call it, stores, role play, whatever. And then, when he's lost his hand, he's down to one. Ideally, you're not fighting yourself, otherwise you just cut off half of your hands. So, a fourth or less to it. So, have hands involved. Watch the thing go. That's okay. Now I just have to find it. Okay. And yeah, this problem. Might as well shut the curtain because I don't think any much. Anyways, the other person here at the flat, apartment, block, whatever you want to call it, there we go. That's a little better. They are doing some spring cleaning. There we go. And that's better. One is everything on the lampshade. That, and yes, I know I haven't made my bed yet. Not to even tell you. So I think I'll just do that now. There we go, that's better. Green this? Not really. It's good enough. Anyways. So what was that called? Metal Gear 3? Okay, thank you. They're the best one. I hope my neighbors don't get annoyed by all the memes, Jack memes. They're probably thinking I'm crazy already. So like a lot of the time they knock them down. Sometimes I have fun with them. Like one time, one of them decided to make a whole lot of noise next door in their closet or something, and I was like, "What the heck just happened?" Of course, I didn't say that aloud. And then, so I asked them, "Are you okay over there?" As I often do, or sometimes do. And so I heard his wife say, "Yeah, I'm okay," or something like that. And it's like, okay. That's the closest thing to a conversation we ever had in like about 3 months at least. I don't know. I don't keep track that much. Subgala, subgala. Time paradox. Got it. Thanks for waiting, huh? Yeah. Thanks for waiting, huh? I got this. I'll play this. Ding. That's fully extended. On my head because I should do that. I don't know why I should. And I kind of forced it. I mean, just feel like doing it. That telling us to say whatever. You know. I'm invincible! And I am now going to Istanbul to see if there is anything, if there is anything that is any goal in Istanbul. You'd have been a hell of a. Okay. Signal love, stealth, mission. Oh, he's totally not going to stealth. I don't know what piece I was looking for. I guess I should be making my bed now. My lightsaber. There was a problem while playing. Have to retry. Cyber. Don't ask. That's you really want to know. I guess you could call it a type of wet dream or something. Don't ask. How do they taste like chicken? I don't know how they taste like chicken. Aaron comes with the door again. Boy, we're really having any problems. How many people are online right now buying an investment in a costume here, like for tomorrow, not realizing it's Halloween already? Well, they decided to like rather investment items they need like their they had a dead mission. They forgot to file the dates and stuff for their ancestors. What? I were told, fortunately, I don't smoke. What do you think you're doing? I think I'm making my bed. They both came in early this morning. That's okay. Now I have another. Okay. Anyway, where'd it go? It's buying their place. See? Just about this. See? Okay, fine. We're totally going to like restart the whole entire thing. Then we're going to do the names. Meantime, let's get some music on or something. I don't know. Maybe the Force wants us to put on creepypasta. Sure, we can do that. It's Halloween. That would probably be better. Creepypasta live stream. See what we got now. Now, if this will work or not, it might. See if it works. Someone just text me? No, I guess not.
When I was roughly in the middle of the room, I started to hear this weird banging.
Oh, come on. I think it's loading. It's loaded. Okay. Now we're making the bed with the lightsaber on. you what size of bed. Make sure that you have at least
one scrape, then 2 more bangs.
First of all, you make sure you have 2 sheets, okay? 2 sets of sheets, that is 2 complete sets of sheets. Okay? Ideally. Or as close as you can get to. And then put one sheet on top of the other. Didn't realize I didn't have my sheet down far enough so they can see what I'm doing. See? Now we've got 2 sheets on. And now
Was L.
Yeah,
Dot. Dash dot dot. I was panicking at this point. My brothers and I were alone when we entered the pillbox. We entered by the left out the right. I didn't see anyone else come in through the right, and I didn't hear anyone come in the. This was a blight pillbox. A completely concrete and hollow area. There's no way someone else could have come inside without me hearing the echo of their footsteps. But here I was, hearing the echo of someone in one of the rooms. I didn't know what was going on. Hey, I said, still thinking it had to be my brothers. Can you stop that? The sound kept going. Maybe there's someone else here.
I would have been like, hi.
No. Maybe. At this point, I didn't care if it was my siblings or not. The noise was freaking me out. Excuse me.
Like a hatchet.
Can you stop that?
I'm standing.
Kept
here.
going.
I'm not moving.
Please, it's scaring me.
I'm sorry I'm scaring you, okay?
It kept going.
I don't even know how I'm scaring you.
Is this Morse code?
I don't know what you just said.
And then, the place went silent. It was just me staring into an empty room by myself in an old, unused pillbox. I could have left them, but I don't know why I did this.
Okay.
I said, if this is Morse code, start the pattern over. Slower. If you're trying to tell me something, do it a bit slower so I can understand. The first bang sent a shiver down my spine. I couldn't believe what was happening. I was inside of the room. It was empty, but the sounds came from there. It didn't make sense. It was Morse code, but it was slower than before. Bang, bang, bang. Scrape, scrape, scrape. Bang, bang, bang. Bang, bang, bang. Scrape, scrape, scrape. Bang, bang, bang. SOS. SOS. A distress call. But it didn't stop there. After a brief silence, a new pattern was played. Bang, scrape, scrape, scrape. Bang, scrape. Scrape, bang, bang. Jane? Out loud, I asked, who was Jane? Scrape, 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 bang, bang. Scrape, 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 bang, bang. Yeah. 8. I slowly walked out of the room. You fucking kidding me? I didn't believe it. How could I? 8 is a Morse code abbreviation for hugs and kisses. What do you want from me? I almost yelled. Scrape, bang, bang, bang. Scrape, bang, scrape, bang. Scrape, bang, 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 scrape. B, C, N, U. It was another abbreviation. be seeing you. That was it. I liked it out of there. I ran to the right exit and quickly decided that was a bad idea. I ran out the left instead. I could still hear the banging and scraping as I ran out of the pillbox. When I came up, I almost crashed into my little brother. He was about to go inside. My grandmother was getting up, frustrated at the annoying banging that she thought I was doing inside of the pillbox. As everything had gone so quickly, I blurted out quickly, "Sorry." Shortly after I left the pillbox, we went home. My grandmother and little brother didn't question anything. But my older brother noticed that something was wrong. He asked me if I was okay and told me what happened. He said that when he left the pillbox, he too heard the banging and the scraping, but he thought that it was me. He was happy when the banging stopped for a short while. But when it started back up again, he was going to send down our little brother to get me to stop. We didn't talk to each other for the rest of the night and the next morning. We acted as if nothing happened. The whole thing was just a little too freaky for some random teenagers. Those phrases, those words, they still confuse me to this day. Hugs and kisses, be seeing you, Jane. But most chilling, the phrase that sounded like it didn't even belong in that conversation. SOS. SOS. The first time I met him was at my grandfather's memorial. Dark, round spectacles just covered his eyes. Long black cloak, steel gray hair, halfway down his shoulders. A whole room of handkerchiefs, downcast faces, but he was the only one smiling. I was only 8 at the time, like a good enough reason to sit beside him. "Did you know Poppy?" I always called my grandfather that. "Better than anyone," the man had said. He must have been almost 70, the same age my grandfather was. "Were you his friend?" "His closest friend. I'm the one who killed him, you know. You can't get any closer than that." I tried to ask him more questions, but the service was starting and my mother had kept turning around and hushing me. My mom gave the eulogy. That was the first time I'd ever seen her cry. I guess I must have started sniffling too, because the man next to me put his hand on my knee and gave it a light squeeze. His fingers felt like he'd just come inside from a blizzard. See, by the end of the final sermon, they brought out some bagpipes and they were playing Amazing Grace. And then I really did cry for real. I remember it being hard for me to understand why I'd never get to see Poppy again. I mean, sure, he was dead, but that didn't mean that I couldn't still visit and eat his barbecue sandwiches, did it? Once I started crying, I didn't know how to make it stop. People must have been sympathetic, but just remember how embarrassing it felt to have everyone staring at me. I was the first one out of the room, running all the way outside the church to the big oak tree in the yard. The man with the dark spectacles was first to find me. "Hey there, champ," he said. "Bet I can make you smile." I shook my head and I pressed my face into the bark. "Watch this," he said in a voice accustomed to being obeyed. I looked up to see him whistling at a squirrel who sat in one of the lower branches. The squirrel ran down the trunk until it was a few feet above our heads, then jumped without hesitation to land on his shoulder. "How'd you do that?" I asked. "I can do all sorts of things," he said, crouching down to my level so I could pet the squirrel. "Why'd you kill him?" "Because it made me happy," he said, standing to lift the squirrel out of my reach. "Run along now. I'll see you soon. We can play another game then." "When?" "When I kill your grandmother. Not long now. Not long at all. 3 weeks and she was gone. She told me, my parents told me that she just missed grandfather so much that she decided to follow him to heaven. I knew better. One night I couldn't sleep. I crept to the top of the stairs to listen to them talking about it in the kitchen. Grandmother's hands were peacefully folded over the knife in her heart when they found the body. The man was there at the next memorial, just like he'd promised. I was afraid of him now, sitting as far away as I could. I wanted to tell someone what he'd done, but somehow, 8-year-old brain thought that it would get me in trouble. It was my fault she got murdered. I knew it was going to happen. I didn't try to stop him. He found me again while I was waiting for my parents to leave. Out by the tree this time, he'd gotten there first. I could feel his dark spectacles trained on me as I crossed the yard, but I couldn't stop myself. I wanted to know who was next. I hate you, were the first words out of my mouth. That's all right. Most people hate things they don't understand. I want you to stop killing people. I'm not going to do that. But here's what I can do. But I can make you smile. He sat down on the grass and began to concentrate. Maybe I should have run. But it wasn't a matter of fear for me. It was simply a choice between interesting and boring. Questions and answers. I watched the trees as the squirrel scampered down the trunk. Come to me, he whispered. And off it flew, straight into his hand. Not just the squirrel either. Ants were swarming out of the ground to line up around his feet. Beetles and worms, unknowable, monstrous, scratched
something is going on.
their way through the ground to bow before him. Even a stray cat came sprinting across the yard, none of the animals the least perturbed by the other presence. We were all watching him, expectantly, like a dog waiting for their treat. Let's dance, he said. So they did. The squirrel hopped from one foot to the other, the cat stood on its hind legs, and all the insects began to spastically twirl upon the ground. Despite everything, I couldn't help but smile at the spectacle. I wasn't smiling the next time I saw him. At my mother's funeral. 31 years, and he hadn't aged a day. I could feel those dark spectacles on me the moment I entered the room, like childhood's imaginary monsters come to life before my very eyes. The same gray hair, the same black coat, the same subtle smirk creasing the edges of his face. I couldn't stand still in the same room as him. I felt hot and dizzy. I didn't know what was real and what wasn't, only that I needed air. My feet traced the familiar steps to the tree without intervention from the scattered minds. My mother had been found by her neighbor the same way, a knife in her heart. I wanted to hit him. I wanted to kill him. To wipe that smirk off of his face. Whatever it took, I was... I was seething when he approached. Drawing closer, all of my carefully prepared arguments and threats burned from my mind. I couldn't understand how anyone could have the audacity to say, "Come on, it's not all bad." I could make you smile.
Cheap. Something I don't like. There's a lot of way too cheap. People stop texting me right now.
Dead. Sometimes I wish I was. He said. Sitting down on the grass, I hesitated. Not the answer I was expecting. But if I was dead, then who would have been there to kill your mother? I kicked him while he sat on the ground. As hard as I could, I jumped up on him. I grabbed the fist
Look, this guy's already immortal. Why are you bothering?
Full of his long hair to fling him down onto the ground. Everyone else was still
Your bare fist. Don't kill people with your bare fists that are immortal. Or
inside the church, but no one but God was going to see what I did to him. And God would understand. He didn't make a move to rise or resist. He just spat enough blood to say, "Come to me." I kicked him again, and he went down hard, and again I heard something break under his coat. I would have kept going, but a piercing pain in the back of my neck made me spin around. A crow was diving at me, pecking at me, its black eyes glinting with intelligence and purpose. "Fight your own battles," I shouted, batting the bird away from my face. "Are you too scared? Is that why you can only kill old people who can't fight back?" "Kill you," he admitted.
yeah, that's weird.
I was on top of him again, pushing him back into the dirt. The crow wouldn't relent, but I could suffer through any cuts and scratches it gave
I don't know what's going on, but we're having internet connection problems. Like this whole count.
me to get at him. But here's what I can do. He said through his broken teeth. Bet I can make you smile. You know what? Fine. Fine. Make me smile. And if you can't, then you're going to turn yourself into the police and tell them about every person that you've killed. If I can. And you're going to help me with my next kill. That took me a second to process. Of course, I wouldn't do it. Because I wouldn't smile either. My face was harder than stone. I nodded deal. I let him stand and dust off his jacket, which he did quite easily, as though he'd suffered no hurt from my assault. I can't kill you, because you're not ready yet. Your grandparents were. Your mother was, although she never told you. All I did is help them along their journey. You're insane. I'm not smiling. I've got proof, he said, forcefully popping his jaw back into place with a slight grunt. It's all around you. They never forget me after I've helped them. I looked around where he gestured. The tree, the squirrel crouching to spring at me, the thousands of insects even now gathering at my feet, the crow watching from the branches, its head cocked to the side, its keen intelligence. Mom? The crow hopped down from the tree and landed on my shoulder, brushing its head against my cheek. I swallowed hard. That felt more like crying than smiling, but I guess I was doing both so that he won the bet. Death is an evil thing. only when seen in isolation, he told me. But death never exists in isolation. It's just an abstract thought. To imagine it that way. A single thread once woven may seem lost, but only until you step back and see the whole tapestry helped create. Come with me now, and I'll show you how to weave. As sure as any bird or beast who answered his call, I followed him. Followed him. Learned from him. And killed for him. And I've been following him ever since. There's a reason I won't go to Mockingbird Park. Not just because it's creepy. Not just because it's dark. There are twisty twine trees. There are weeds and neglect. But worse than all that is the mocking effect. As you walk the park paths, you'll hear a faint echo. Footfalls. Your own. In that dim and grim ghetto. Coming closer and closer as if someone's there. You whirl and see no one. Just fog in the air. So you whistle. It whistles. You cough. And it coughs. Then from murky mists, a gray shadow breaks off. It's your height and your size and your very same shape. And then it's upon you. No time for escape. You suck in cold air and then poof. It moves through you. You laugh at yourself. A shadow can't chew you. But you turn and see someone who's walking away. This person. Your double. You glimpse with dismay. They continue their strolling on down the park trail while you melt into mist. A fog of gray veil. And that's why I won't go back to Mockingbird Park. I like being you. I hope you like the dark. You aren't the brightest fellow, are you, Mr. Lester? Come now, why pout? Everyone has their talents. You're an exceptionally clever thief, I'll grant you that. In the 15 years Van Winkle's Museum of Magic has been in business, I've never been robbed. Until you. What's the phrase you hoodlums use? Casing the joint? You performed the task quite admirably. So many innocent questions. How's business, Mr. Fenwickle? What's your favorite item, Mr. Fenwickle? Your ring of luck? Is it really magic, Mr. Fenwickle? Careless, I was. Probably relying too much on my ring, eh? But as I explained, given even odds, it only increases one's luck from 50% to around 66%. Still, the difference is appreciable. Even you can envision the benefits of being 2/3 lucky. So you returned tonight, avoided every obstacle in the showroom, reached my upstairs bedroom, and slipped the ring off my finger. You certainly demonstrated your talents at thievery, Mr. Lester. One might even say you were lucky. And as you crept off wearing your ill-gotten gain, your luck increased. You disagree? But I understand your confusion, although you correctly assume that by wearing the ring, all your chances immediately improved to 66%. You also assumed the ring of luck meant a ring of good luck. Really, Mr. Lester, everyone knows luck comes in two flavors. Before you put on the ring, the odds are 50-50 that one's bad luck will improve rather than good. Thus, in my museum, in the dark, your chances of stumbling across various objects increase to 66%. And as you've discovered, Mr. Lester, My guillotine display is 100%. Jake Foster can't stop running his fingers through his hair. I'll never get used to this, Doc, he grins. Get wheeled in as an old man, walk out young again. Last time it took weeks, now it's a same-day procedure. I looked down at his charts. Yes, well, there's been many advancements in the, 60 years since we last saw you. I'll say, I should have done this sooner. It's so easy now. I wouldn't call it easy, just quicker. Foster is brimming with energy, eager to rejoin the world as a healthy, virile 22-year-old. His charts look good, so I hand him the release forms. Here you go, Mr. Foster. Your wife's already been discharged, and she's waiting outside. His eyes gleam at the mention of his wife. Oh, they'll have fun tonight, but statistics show they'll split up soon. The young always crave fresh experiences, new knowledge. There's only one thing they never seem to learn. Not until it's too late. After Mr. Foster leaves, it's time for my next duty. In another room surrounded by machines, an old man lies waiting. Let's do this, Doc, he demands weakly. We're already done. His bald head wrinkles in confusion. I don't understand. You wanted to be downloaded into a cloned younger body. And you were. Then, why am I still here? I tapped my needle, then inserted it into his IV. Haven't you ever downloaded anything before? Downloading doesn't destroy the original. That's my job. As I watch, Jake Foster's eyes widen in fear before closing forever. Just like the previous Jake Foster. 60 years ago.
Giving my new one a this is inside.
Gateway of the Mind is a Wasta. A bunch of mad scientists attempting some unbelievably literal interpretation of a figure of speech. This experiment was performed promptly after World War II ended, and seemed to fit in with the long line of strange experiments performed by the Nazis during and post-war. And that's the basis of this story. The Nazi reign was famous for its backdoor scientists and occult researchers. Special expeditionary divisions of the Reich were often sent out in search of artifacts or locations of occult or religious significance. Meanwhile, in Germany, bunkers were assembled and mansions and castles were fitted with labyrinths and dungeons, which were filled with strange experiments and research notes. Whenever the Allies found these places, they were often gutted, burned, or otherwise destroyed and abandoned. And whenever a lab was found intact, the research was often incoherent or missing, or later destroyed by the Allies to prevent the Nazis from recovering any hidden data. A lot of the Nazi experiments were kept under the radar, until recently. Veterans who served as guards to the labs and ritual zones have explained what they've seen. Folders and books have been uncovered in boxes and crates belonging to scientists. A fair few of these contain a common research goal: giving man the power of God. Exactly the true power is often up to debate, but it appears that this is often described in Nazi research mortality, undeath, invincibility, or other factors surrounding losing the capacity to die in some way or another. The larger part of this research was actually legitimately based. Certain doses of chemical compounds to aid blood flow in aging people, first concepts that are now used in today's transplant surgery, grafting, ointments that renew skin, antibodies to various diseases, and fitness and dieting research. However, one set of crates, discovered in Hamburg in 1999, went way off this research side. This stuff crossbred the occult experiments in immortality research. The introductory folders and proof of concept of the research began with the principle brain controls the body completely and wholly, and as the body slowly degrades around it, it continues to function. Further statements say that the reason the body is left to degrade is because the human brain is set on a biological timer, such is why butterflies can only live a day, yet other insects can often live longer. The brain tells us to die. It is proposed, as the brain grows, it begins to make connections, resulting in the human becoming more mature, having an advancing brain. At the ages of 35 to 50, however, these connections slowly break down, resulting in forgetfulness, dementia, and other mental diseases reserved for the elderly. The Nazi scientists proposed that the brain has a universal kill switch that activates as soon as the brain is fully developed. In all normal humans, this kill switch will initiate a shutdown in bodily functions, which occurs over several decades. As soon as the body is fully shut down, the brain will be forced to die through lack of oxygen. It is said that Wemmer's syndrome, a disease where a person ages rapidly, is a result of the kill switch function activating far too early. The Nazis proposed that they could remove the kill switch and give the human mind immortality, and from that, complete immortality. Needless to say, brain surgery was incredibly difficult during those times, but it was possible. In the stacks of folders, there were many different diagrams and past research on the brain, psychology, the human mind, and the like. The experiments were initially proposed to Nazi executives in 1940, and permission was granted to perform the experiments in 1942 under one condition. The experiments must be conducted outside of Germany. The German populace must not see the experiment in any way, shape, or form. It was no surprise to the scientists that the executives were paranoid about the public relations, but the idea of performing the research outside of the fatherland was foreign in itself. Most experiments were performed in bunkers or basements. The scientists complied and were able to organize a setup with their ally, Japan. In late 1942, the research had begun. And here's where it gets strange. The research team had taken over a Japanese orphanage. The orphanage was in the hills, supposedly somewhere in Shimane, an area nearby Hiroshima. The scientists deducted that if they tried to take the usual test subjects, old or diseased people, with nothing left to live for, similar in the fashion to Gateway of the Mind, they would be playing with the variable of disease, or more importantly, they would be experimenting on a brain that has already had an active kill switch, rendering it useless in the context of finding the solution. As a result, the Nazi scientists demanded that children, namely the orphans in the orphanage, which they deemed to again have nothing else to live for, would become test subjects. Their young brains eliminated any cause for concern of an already activated kill switch. To begin the experiment, the children went through numerous immunizations and intense psychological training to ensure that they would prevent any defects and keep general benchmarks for their subjects. Next, they began with the older staff of the orphanage. Put under anesthesia, the surgeons opened up their skulls to find a good cross of an adult brain, and began to find key differences in it and a child's brain. After gaining a model of both a child brain and an adult brain, the scientists deduced that the universal kill switch wasn't located in the brain, but in the cerebellum. located at the rear. The cerebellum commands all subconscious activity in the brain, which is understandable since it isn't a conscious action to set off the kill switch. Systematically, they took the tallest child in the orphanage and began to open her up. They were about to begin their first kill switch sectomy. They had managed to open up the cerebellum part presumed to be the kill switch. However, upon closing the subject up, they found that she had expired. They assumed that the incision on the brain had been too brash and required far more precision. The body was dumped in the forest behind the orphanage. After imports of different tools and different techniques developed, the scientists were finally able to remove the kill switch and successfully revive the patients. In May 1943, they had taken one of the youngest girls in the orphanage and removed the kill switch. The only function that she lost was the ability to sweat. After they assumed success, the scientists had to celebrate. Everyone went to sleep. And the next morning, the girl did not wake up and was revealed to be comatose. After a while, she was revived successfully, and the kill switchectomies continued. The initial success gave the doctors a new state of mind, one of refreshment. They were able to continue their experiments with the ease of mind that the theory was proven. Well, so they assumed. Before the doctors continued their removal research, they commissioned several doctors in from Moscow who were trained in the practice of bodily revival. Technically, zombification. However, it relies on the principles of using electric shocks and artificial hearts to power the body back up. They stated the reason for this was that the original subject always became comatose or clinically dead whenever she went to sleep, and then revived herself in the morning. She had no signs of this behavior before the experiment, and despite the fact that she was revived, the doctors did not want to risk a success turning into a failure. And the Russian scientists were put on the task of bringing her back to life whenever she expired. After several days of this, the Nazis concluded that it was safe to continue. Project Venom was a Russian experiment to create super soldiers from the theory of Dr. Frankenstein. As a repayment for the use of the Russian scientists, Russia had asked that they combine the research of Project Venom with the Nazis' ongoing experiments. Naturally, the Nazis agreed. However, the limited number of orphans was debilitating. As the Nazis required so many of them and could only offer a single girl, the Russians were content and began their proof of concept. They had artificially created an arm over in Moscow, which was on its way to the orphanage to be grafted on, to prove the amputation and replacement could work. In the meantime, the Russians had to prepare for this. The girl's right arm was amputated. Mysteriously, shortly after, the Russian scientists packed up their equipment and left. The replacement arm never came, and the girl was left with a bandage strapped over her, perpetually. The Russians were said to have left with a fearful haste, as if suddenly the air had turned too cold for their tastes. The Nazi scientists attempted to play around with their successful experiment by trying different aspects of it, and sadly, none of them worked. Here's a list of them. Entry through the forehead, performed on a 10-year-old boy. Skull was deformed and the boy had been virtually lobotomized by the end of it. However, he wasn't vegetative as a result, although he was mentally retarded due to the experiment. Entry through the lower jaw, performed on a 6-year-old girl. The tongue and most of the flesh on the lower jaw was removed and could not be replaced. The subject's sinuses were also scrambled. Entry through the side of the head. Subject was resultantly half deaf. It should also be noted that there was no anesthesiac during the surgery, and the screams were truly mortifying, as most most journals read. With the failure of these, the kill switch was still removed, and the subjects acted much in the same way as the first girl, expiring upon sleep. However, they were reduced to a mere 10 people due to all the previous failures. This includes the caretaker, and they had performed surgery on all the children. The doctors began to formulate ideas that a child, a kill switch isn't already activated, but in an adult, a kill switch could be reversed using a chemical compound to eliminate the hormone produced and the kill switch then removed. This was performed on all the caretakers as well. Surprisingly successful. They all survived. During the experiment, scientists were told to watch over the successful children and monitor their behavior. Now, this part gets a little freaky. They appear normal at first, just like any of the other children, playing, cheering, learning normally, but when separated, seem off. They stroll carelessly around, and with a blank smile on their face, their eyes looking straight at you. If you approach from behind, their heads snap around with an ungodly speed, and for a moment, you can almost see an expression so vile on their face that it makes you want to cower, but then you realize that they're just forming their dreamy smile again. Another thing is that they follow us, but it feels like they're ghosts at nighttime. They also seem to be playing a game a lot more than when we started. I haven't got much knowledge of Japanese, but it seems the game is circle U, as described by one of the translators. A group of children surrounded one child who sits in the center alone, and they link arms and begin to move in a circular manner around the child, making scary faces at them and saying an eerie chant. And you lose if you flinch. Upon talking to them, I've noticed they seem more dreamy, forgetful, and somewhat blank, as if the experiments wiped their memories as well. But it's not an innocent kind of dreaming, rather something more sinister. They stare at you with wide eyes and ask you questions never thought that they would know. One asked, "When your grandmother died, did she really leave you a gold-plated watch?" And it may seem crazy, but my honest answer was yes. In early 1945, Hiroshima was bombed. Germany forfeits, and the experiments were ground to a halt. The Germans began packing up their equipment. Most of them had already returned home due to their mental welfare, stating that they had shown signs of insanity, and only 4 scientists remained. After sending the last set of equipment off, the scientists deemed it only justified that they inform the caretakers that they were leaving. They did so. And to the horror of one of the scientists, and the surprise of the rest, the head caretaker said in fluent German, "Will you play one last game with us?" The 3 scientists agreed, and a circle of children and caretakers formed around them. Now if you flinch, you lose. The one horrified scientist ran to the last truck, jumped on it without looking back. If you go to Hiroshima, go around the woods, and you may find some dirt trails there. If you travel down them, you'll see a beautiful forest. If you travel down one that had signs of trucks going through it, you'll feel cold. And you'll see that there's a lot of trees that are cut down. But don't wander from the path, or you'll likely get lost in the woods there. If you pay attention, you'll notice that the tree stumps look like kneeling people, missing heads. And if you continue, the air will get cold. Naturally, because you're climbing uphill, right? Of course, eventually you'll reach a clearing with an old stone building in the center, vines covering the place. Go inside if you want to play. As soon as you open the door, it will come out, similar to that of a rotting corpse. And if you look down the hall, it will be dark, regardless of the time of day, since there was no lights. Continue down the hall. Take the first left and go down that hallway until you see one door that appears to be made out of a red-colored wood. The rest will be brown. Open that door. You'll find 10 happy children and caretakers, all wearing kimonos, playing in a normal playroom. One is missing her arm, another is missing his forehead, and a third lacks a jaw, but all bandaged with clinical precision. The place should be very clean and tidy, dependent of things, and well lit. At once your presence will draw the attention of everyone in the room, including the ones that look far too preoccupied or distracted. They will turn to look at you. Carefree smiles from each of their pleasant faces, and the head caretaker, in all her beauty, will ask, "Will you come play with us?" At this time, if you haven't soiled your pants, you really should. It'll save you the trouble later. If you say no, the door will slam shut behind you, and if you try to go down the hallways out to the exit, you will only find another dark hallway. Open any of the brown doors, you'll find an operating table or bunk beds. If you continue down the third hallway, you'll realize that the girl is standing several meters behind you, her face shrouded by shadows. Approach it. Expect your doom. Continue down the hallway and try not to let her catch up to you. But if you say yes, you'll be welcomed into the room. The door will close behind you and everyone will form a circle around you. Now sit down and don't flinch, a cheery voice will say. Just follow the instructions and you'll survive. All light will disappear from the room. Yet you can see the circle of children, each with a vicious expression on their face, one so vile that you will probably flinch. If you can stomach that, though, they'll begin to move around and around you, slowly. You may feel one of them lash towards you. If you look forward, there'll be nothing there besides the children circling normally. If that wasn't enough, they'll be chanting, "Kagome, Kagome." I really can't explain further. No one ever lives to tell the tale of what happens then. If you flinch before they chant, they simply continue as normal. If you choose to stay, maybe the head caretaker or anything other than yes or no, it's told that the children's expressions will turn mortifying. And they'll scream in inhuman voices. Decide. Decide. If you do anything besides say yes or no from here, it's told that the children and caretakers will slam the door on you. If you turn around, the story varies. Supposedly, your worst fears will be waiting at the other side of the hallway, separating you from the exit, and most notably the character is, the least you could do is greet the caretaker before he tears you into oblivion. If he has the capacity, he may well respond, and you will die as a polite person. Don't greet him, and you will end up as one of the beheaded bodies along the trail. If you respond, "I don't understand," and you must be genuine, Baker will say, "Go to your school and watch your children play." You should understand then. Nothing will happen. And close the door on your way out. It's common courtesy. Most creepypastas are fabricated. Some are derived from psychological stigmas, and others are revamped ghost stories. But there's a small percentage of creepypastas which aren't. Like this one. This is a true story. Consider this a warning. In the event that it ever comes to you during a moment of weakness as it did me all those years ago, say no to the pastel man. It isn't that it promises to help. Nothing is worth what it wants in return. I tell you this in hopes that you don't make the same mistake that I did that cold winter night, kneeling beside my father's writhing body on the living room floor. It was 1997 when I first encountered the creature, and ever since not a day has gone by where its awful face hasn't haunted my thoughts. I was a teenager then, but I look at that evening as the night my childhood died, corrupted and violated by a callous hell beast with pure blue skin. Even though it happened years ago, I still remember the events of that fateful first encounter vividly. I could tell you what my father and I were wearing, the toppings on the pizza that we were eating, even the score of the football game playing on the TV. It was around halftime when my father's speech started to become slurred, which I found odd since he had been nursing the same bottle of beer since kickoff. Stranger even, I had seen him drink a six-pack to himself in the past without even appearing tipsy, so I was having trouble understanding how a single drink could have such an effect on him. I realized it wasn't the alcohol, when half his body went limp and he slid off the couch. I asked him if he was all right, but his words had now become incomprehensible. I grabbed the phone off the coffee table and dialed 911. 911, what's your emergency? I think my dad is having a stroke. Thought it only crossed my mind a second before the operator answered the phone. Okay, we have your address. An ambulance is on. It should be there soon. Is he conscious? Yes, he is, but I can't understand him. Nonsensical jumbled sounds were rambling out of my father's mouth. I was afraid. He was all I had. My mother passed away when I was a baby, so I never got the chance to know her, but my dad was always there for me, doing the job of two parents. If I lost him, then I would be alone. That's normal with stroke. It's good that he's awake. And I didn't hear the rest because that's when I dropped the phone. I was having one of those moments where everything faded into the background while my world felt silent. The football game played on the television. The operator giving me instructions over the phone, even the sound of my father's voice as he wailed in agony on the kite noise. Dissolving into the air as I lost all awareness of my surroundings. All of my attention and focus was now on one thing. The horrible abomination that was standing in my kitchen watching my father and I with a twisted smile across its disgusting face, its head narrowly missing, scraping against our kitchen's 9-foot ceiling as it shifted from side to side, fidgeting with anticipation like a giddy child in class on the last day of school, waiting for the final bell to signal summer vacation. The pastel blue skin that covered its entire body, from the creature's head all the way down to its feet, horrible, grimy feet, looked weathered and wrinkled like leather that had been left out in the sun for days. Hanging off its long, lanky frame was a plain brown satchel with black stitching. It lightly caressed the strap of the pouch with a long finger while it looked on with an eager expression on its face. At first, I thought that I had gone mad from the sight of seeing my father have a stroke, but the closer the monstrosity slinked towards us, the more I realized it was no hallucination. It ducked its head under the light fixture in the living room and stepped a spindly leg over the couch. Though the monstrous freak of nature was clearly bipedal, it had moved down to all fours and appeared to be stalking us, like some wild animal hunting its prey. I should have been terrified. But the horrible smile on its god-awful face made me feel more anger towards the thing than fear. It was as if it was taking pleasure in my father's misery. Closer still it crept, and I grabbed my father's hand out of desperation in some veiled attempt to protect him. The creature stopped, its face mere inches from mine before shifting its attention down to my father. I can save him, if you'd like. I was taken aback. I'd prepared for the terrible thing to take a chunk of flesh out of my neck with its teeth, or slash me across the face with its black, crusty nails. But speaking to me was the last thing I expected. He is dying, but I can save him, if you like. I sat there, mouth agape, cradling my father's hand in my arm, and staring into the two pink, bulbous eyes that took up more than a third of the foul creature's face. I remember thinking that they reminded me of Easter eggs, a bizarre connection for my mind to make given the situation. I stood back up on 2 feet, and once again, I was reminded just how imposing the creature really was. It told me its name, which I dare not repeat because it also explained that speaking it is the best way to summon the beast. For the remainder of my story, I will refer to the entity as the Pastel Man. Just a name I came up with due to the pigmentation of its skin and the light shade of pink that was the color of its eyes. That, and for some reason, giving the creature a silly name always helped to make me feel less afraid of it. Not much less, though. Finally, my mind had recovered enough from shock to allow me to stutter out a few words. What do you mean you can save him? What I do is make deals, young man. Its voice was surprisingly angelic, like 1,000 choirs all singing in unison. If one were to close their eyes while the creature spoke to them, they might imagine that they were listening to a seraph, not the hideous monster that was sporting a depraved grin in my living room. However, its extraordinary voice only managed to make me feel more uneasy. It wasn't right that something so beautiful would belong to such a repulsive creature. The Pastel Man gestured to its satchel. I have the ability to save your father's life, but you have to agree to a deal with me. What kind of a deal? Everything happens for a reason. Even death. Its mischievous smile widened just a bit, as if the creature was getting to a punchline of a joke. It's true that I can save your father's life, but someone must die in his place. One shall die, so another may live. That's the deal. I clutched my chest. Not you. What would be the point? No, I'm giving you the option to choose the person who will be replacing your father this evening.
Unfortunately, I have a...
I was stunned by what I was hearing. Are you deaf? The Pastel Man threw its head back and let out a terrible howl. It was only later that I would come to realize that was how the wretched thing laughed. No, I'm clearly not the Grim Reaper, although you aren't the first person to ask me that. I'm not the devil either, nor do I work for him. Let's just say I'm an independent contractor, shall we? Two tiny holes that lied on the center of its face in the absence of a nose flared in satisfaction of its explanation. Can I choose anyone? Well, not anyone. That wouldn't be fun, would it? I could see a row of shark-like teeth behind its mouth as it separated its lips to speak. Your father's replacement must be someone else in your life. I'm not a murderer. My voice was tiny. It barely escaped my mouth. I looked back down to my father. He had lost consciousness and his skin was becoming pale. I don't think I could kill anyone, I know. You don't have to murder anyone, young man. The sly creature was moving into its final pitch. All you have to do is tell me who it is you want dead, and I'll do the rest. Surely, there must be someone you wouldn't mind out of your life. A teacher, an ex-girlfriend, a rival at school, perhaps.
No.
There was. I had fantasies about it many times, but never in my wildest dreams would I have actually acted on it. Everyone has that person in their life who's toxic. Someone who makes getting up in the morning more difficult, and I was certainly no exception. Walter Flanagan, I muttered under my breath. Who? Walter Flanagan. He's the guy at school who gave me this. I lifted my shirt and showed it the handprint-shaped bruise on my chest that Walter had given me during one of his infamous hazing sessions in the locker room earlier that week. He's been shoving me into lockers and beating me up since I was a freshman. The faculty doesn't do anything since he's the best foot history of our school. He's a 5-star recruit going to a huge college next year. ESPN even did a piece on him. Ah. The pastel man began to snicker to itself. It somehow widened its already enormous pink eyes even more, then crouched back down to get face to face with me again. What fun is being a king? Without serfs to torment, huh? I'm tired of being tormented, so just go kill him before I change my mind. The pastel man shot a massive hand out and wrapped its long fingers around my face. The grin that it was wearing since I first laid eyes on it had now been replaced by a scowl. You do not tell me what to do. Are we clear? I nodded sheepishly. The grip it had on my face was so tight. I understood then and there that if it wanted to, the creature could easily snap my neck or crush my skull like an egg. Good. Because it's not so simple, young man. There are steps that must be taken. Steps. Yes. A playful smirk once again returned to the pastel man's face. You will have to be present when this Walter Flanagan dies. In fact, I need you to summon me, or else I can't complete my end of the bargain. Get the boy alone and speak my name. You must watch him die by sunrise, or else you will be violating the terms of our agreement. So, do we have a deal? I nodded again.
I don't know how to find her.
And the monster released its hold of my face before snatching my hand. Its giant paws swallowed my palm as we shook
to
cement the deal. Excellent! With this handshake, our deal is binding, young man. I watched curiously as the pastel man reached into its satchel and fumbled around until it found what it was looking for. In between its repugnant fingers, it held a strange-looking insect, about the size of a quarter. The bug buzzed its wings in attempt to flutter away, but could not escape the pastel man's grasp. With its other hand, it pushed down my father's jaw in order to open it. What are you doing?" I asked. But the pastel man did not answer. It then violently stuffed the insect in my father's mouth, jamming it down his esophagus with its filthy fingers. The pastel man rose once more to its feet. "There. The deed is done. Your father will recover in full. Now, it's your turn. Remember, the boy dies by sunrise or the deal is off." It turned its back to me and began to slither away. "What if I change my mind?" The creature stopped almost mid-stride and twisted around. Again, its smile had been supplanted by an awful sneer. I felt less safe than when it was holding my face in a vice grip earlier. "Your father's health has already been restored, so someone must replace him. One must die, so another shall live. That was the deal. If you fail to complete your end of the bargain, then that someone will be you. Believe me when I say this, young man. I don't need to be summoned once our deal has been broken. I will come for you. That is a promise. And when I do,
now you die.
You're going to wish you never crossed me."
Hi, please not kill me. I hope
With that,
what are you talking
it continued out the kitchen and through the back door. I chased after it, but by the time I got outside into the backyard, the thing had disappeared. It was then that I spotted the lights of the ambulance as it pulled across the street from my house. I flagged down the EMTs and led them to my father. It wasn't difficult to find Walter.
Let me guess. He stalked him.
I knew exactly where he was going to be, but I had completely lost track of time while waiting to hear from my first in the ICU. I had to hurry to Eddie Gillen's house. Eddie's parents were out of town, and he had been talking all week at school. Talking all week at school about the rager that he had been planning on throwing. There were two things I knew about Walter. 1, Eddie was his best friend. 2, he never missed a party. It was somewhere around 3:30 a.m. when I pulled my car up to Eddie's. I parked a little ways down the street so that I wouldn't be spotted. Because I had gotten held up at the hospital, I feared that I had missed my chance to catch Walter. My concerns were alleviated when I saw his raged pickup truck still parked in the driveway. Another thought crossed my mind. What if Walter had gotten too drunk and passed out? I tried to think of a way to get into Eddie's and get Walter alone long enough for the pastel to do whatever it was that he had planned. Luckily for me, it wasn't too long before Walter stumbled out of Eddie's front door and climbed into his truck. I let out a sigh, having just escaped a potentially challenging problem. He pulled out and I followed behind, staying far enough away so that I wouldn't tip him off. He was drunk. Even from the distance that I was tailing him, I could see his truck swerving in and out of its lane. The pastel man's otherworldly voice played itself over and over like a heavenly broken record in my mind. "You must watch him die by sunrise." "It will kill you. Just remember, you're doing this for Dad." I'm not sure if it was the little angel on my shoulder or the little devil that was whispering in my ear. I looked out my driver's side window. A pink ribbon lined the horizon, the very first signs of sunlight making its presence known in the dark evening sky. In a couple of hours, morning would arrive, and I would be too late to complete my end of the bargain. I would see the pastel men again, one way or another. Walter lived up in the foothills outside of town, where some of the wealthier people owned homes. I had been there once for a school project, one where I did all the work and he ended up taking credit. We had come to a part of the road leading towards his house that cut through a wooded area. I knew that there would be no houses for a stretch, so I decided that was where I would make my move, until I was tailgating the truck, then started flashing my brights and honking my horn. I was preparing to rear-end him in order to get him to stop driving. But it didn't even take that to get the job done. He must have been panicking. His truck started to swerve violently across the street before running off the road, side-sweeping a tree. Coming to a complete stop. I pulled up behind him and then hesitated for a moment. A glimpse of the creature's grin flashed through my mind, causing me to shudder. I got out of my car, but left the engine running and my headlights on. "Hey, Walter!" I shouted. Walter's door jerked open. He jumped out of the truck to the ground. "Sean, the shithead?" He was confused, but clearly annoyed. Sean the shithead was the nickname that he had affectionately given me on my second week of school. Within a month, he had my entire class calling me that. "You think this is funny? I'm gonna fuck you up, you little bitch." He stormed towards me with both fists clenched. Again, doubts crossed my mind about whether or not I could pull the trigger. Guilt began to pump through my veins. Walter's life was about to end, and it was going to be because of me. Memories darted through my consciousness. All the after-school beatings I took at the hands of Walter, the pastel man's wicked smile, the look on my father's face as he kicked and screamed on the living room floor. Finally, those words, spoken through that unnerving angelic voice of that terrible monster. "One must die, so another shall live." Walter was moving closer. It was now or never. I had to choose whether or not I would summon the beast before the decision was out of my hands. I shouted the pastel man's real name out in a burst of emotion aimed directly at the star football player. Walter paused for a moment, looking at me in confusion, and then recollected himself and proceeded towards me again. The pastel man was nowhere to be seen. For the second time that evening, I wondered if I had gone insane. Could everything that happened to me that night have been in my head? What was real? Was my father even sick? Again, I repeated the thing's name in an effort to summon it, but this time it did nothing to hinder Walter's pursuit of me. He violently shoved me against the hood of his car, grabbed hold of my shirt collar, and spun me around. Walter raised his fist to hit me, and I winced and put up my hands in order to prepare for impact. But he never struck me. It was only when I opened my eyes that I realized I wasn't crazy. Walter's face was white. His mouth hung open just as mine had first caught sight of the pastel man earlier that evening. I turned my head to see that unmistakable, long, lanky body slink out from the shadows and in front of my car's headlights. Its face still wore that warped smile, and I knew just beyond those thin lips was a mouth full of tiny daggers, capable of tearing muscle from bone. Neither Walter nor I said a word. I think I might have been almost as terrified as him. My stomach began to feel sick as the pastel man stalked ever closer. I didn't look at Walter's face. How could I? The boy was about to die at the hands of that horrible monster, and it was my fault. I didn't have to summon it. I didn't have to shake its hand. I'm sorry. It truly was. And I still am. I hadn't taken my eyes off the Pastel Man, but I think it had more to do with not being able to look at Walter in the face than fear for my life. Walter said nothing. My car's headlights fell on the creature's face, and now we could both see it clearly. The Pastel Man's large pink eyes seemed to glow bright in the light of the headlamps. Walter let go of me and made a break for his truck, but the hellbeast pounced on him with a surprising amount of speed and agility that I had not yet seen it demonstrate. His screams were met with only apathy from the creature as it dug its filthy black fingernails into Walter's abdomen. I tried to look away, but the Pastel Man made sure I remembered our agreement. You must watch, young man. We had a deal. I forced myself to look back at the massacre. The creature's smile had mutated from mischievous to depraved. It looked as if it was deriving some sort of sick sexual pleasure out of the torture that it was putting Walter through. Deeper still, it burrowed its long, bony fingers into Walter's stomach, and with a jerk, the heinous thing yanked out a handful of his intestines and dragged them across the ground as it approached me, flaring those holes on its face that filled in for a nose and clearly pleased with its handiwork. It's over then? I'm not sure if I was asking or begging the creature as the two of us faced each other in the empty street that night. The Pastel Man threw his head back and once again let out a revolting howl. Over? We're just getting started! It headed back over towards Walter, who at this point was crawling along the ground, still trying to get to his truck while his innards trailed behind him. The Pastel Man cut him off and snatched him off the asphalt, easily lifting him by the head with one hand. It toyed with him for a bit, forcing Walter to look into his hideous face. With its free hand, the creature reached into its satchel and pulled out a much bigger insect this time. It was different than the one my father had unknowingly ingested, both in size and in appearance. If the bug that the creature jammed down my father's throat was the size of a quarter, this one must have been as large as a golf ball. It was slimy, the mucus-like membrane that encased the body glistened in my car's headlights. The Pastel Man dangled the nasty bug in front of Walter's face for a few seconds. Now be a good boy and open your mouth. Walter screamed. That gave the blue beast the opening that it needed. It thrusted the slimy insect into his mouth and passed his tonsils with its filthy fingers. I watched on as Walter gagged, presumably on the oversized maggot, as it made its way down his throat. Soon he began to turn blue. I could tell he was choking to death, and even though I wanted to save him, there was nothing I could do. A minute later, the Pastel Man dropped his lifeless body to the ground. It examined the carnage for a moment, pondering over it as if it was a masterpiece in an art gallery. Then the demon turned away, retreated back towards the shadows, and disappeared into the night without saying a word. I stood there on the road, looking at the scene and still feeling sick to my stomach from what I had just witnessed. I didn't know what I expected to happen after the deed was done. There was no explosion, no brilliant light show, where I would watch Walter's soul either drag down to hell or ascend upwards towards the heavens, just a dead boy in the road. A dead boy and his murderer. Pastel Man was the gun, but I pulled the trigger. In a way, there were two dead boys on the road that evening. I knew I didn't have time to dawdle. At any moment, a car could come driving down the street and find me standing in the middle of that massacre. I sprinted back to my car and sped down the street towards town. The coroner attributed Walter's death to a drinking and driving accident. Although there was, understandably, a lot of suspicion regarding the odd circumstances surrounding his demise.
Well, yeah,
The autopsy revealed no evidence of the slimy bug that the Pastel Man had placed in Walter's throat.
Murdered him.
The town was devastated. I remember a candlelit vigil was held in his honor. A couple of big news outlets covered his death because of Walter's status as the elite college football recruit. My father made a complete recovery, and just a couple of days after his stroke, was released from the hospital. I would go on to graduate high school and meet the love of my life the very first semester at my university. Her name was Diana. She was the most beautiful girl I had ever seen. We married shortly after college, settled down, and had a wonderful boy named Matthew. However, I never forgot the hand that I played in Walter's death. I have carried that guilt with me since the event of that night. No matter how much I wanted to, I couldn't forget the pastel man. It must have seen me as an easy patsy, because the creature had come to me again and again every time a loved one had been on the brink of death, offering me the same deal that I had accepted that first shameful night. Though the creature had been persistent in its pursuit of bloodlust, the image of Walter's gruesome death never left my mind and gave me the strength to say no to its propositions. Even years later, on the eve of my father's passing, I was able to refuse its proposal when the pastel man visited me in the hospital room. I've been cursed to have my soul tested till the day that I die by the pastel man. A test that for years I was able to persevere through, until one evening where my life began crumbling down and once more the creature took advantage of me in a moment of weakness. Diana and Matthew were on their way back from the airport after visiting my in-laws. I was swamped at work and had to pull an all-nighter in order to finish a project by its deadline, so my wife hailed a taxi rather than asking me to pick them up. It was around midnight and I was alone in the office when I got a call from the police department. They told me that a drunk driver had collided with their cab on the highway coming back from the airport, and my wife and the cabbie were killed on impact, and my son was in critical condition. I sat there at my desk, unable to move or formulate a coherent thought. It was then that I realized that I wasn't by myself in the office anymore. Perched atop my boss's desk was the pastel man. That abhorrent smile still painted across its nasty, wrinkled face. It didn't need to make an offer. This, I believe, the creature already knew. Can you save them? Yes. And no. What do you mean? Just spit it out. The pastel man's smirk disappeared, and I could tell that it was not pleased with my tone of voice. Memories of the vice grip that it had on my face the last time I demanded something from the creature bled into my consciousness. Perhaps it realized I was past the point of threats, because instead of lunging at me as the creature had done in the past, it decided to clarify its cryptic response. I cannot pull someone back from death's clutches, only save them before it gets a hold of them. Your wife is dead. And make your peace with that. Your son's life, on the other hand, can be salvaged. For a price, of course. I racked my mind. I couldn't think of a single person in my life who deserved to die at the hands of that pale blue monstrosity. Even someone as awful as Walter didn't deserve that gruesome fate that he received that night due to my poor decision. But my son was all that I had now, and he didn't deserve to die either, not because someone else had made a poor decision that evening and got behind the wheel of a car. They were too intoxicated to drive. The pastel man's glorious voice filled the room again. I seemed to be hearing it from all directions. The drunk driver that crashed into your family's cab is still alive, and in the very same hospital as your son. Why not him? For the first time that evening, I looked into the big pink eyes of the creature. You said it had to be someone I know. Semantics! This needs to be someone who has directly impacted your life. The moment that he drove his car into your wife and your son's taxi, he became a candidate. Pastel Man flared at the tiny holes on its face with glee, the way it always did when it was content with itself. Fine, let's do it, I said. I shook its giant hand to make the agreement official, and with that the Pastel Man gave me the instruction to complete our deal. When I met the doctors at the hospital, they updated me on the condition of my son. We've done all we can. But he's a fighter.
Well, at least I'm undead.
The doctors feigned optimism,
But
but I could see in their eyes they didn't expect him to make it through the night. They led me to his room and gave me some time alone with him. The Pastel Man was already there when I entered, smiling down on his broken body, and quickly I shut the door behind me and nodded to the creature. It reached a gangly arm into its satchel and pulled out the same type of strange-looking insect that had shoved down my father's throat. I opened Matthew's mouth, and with two grubby fingers the creature crammed the bug deep into his oral cavity. He will make a full recovery. Now, it's your turn. The Pastel Man waltzed behind the hospital curtain in my son's room. I knew I didn't have to check to see if he had disappeared, if it were to make another appearance at the hospital that evening. And it would be because I spoke his name. When I agreed to the bargain at my office, the Pastel Man had told me what room the driver was being kept in. His injuries were far less severe than Matthew's, so he was in a different wing of the hospital. I could feel my heart pounding as I made my way towards his room. With each step, the beating of my chest grew louder. Already, that same feeling of guilt I had felt when I was looking at Walter's corpse lying in the middle of the road washed over me. I was about to take another person's life. Who was I to decide whether someone deserved to live or die? I felt just as ugly and horrible as the Pastel Man looked. Maybe I didn't have pointed teeth or wrinkled blue skin, but if I knew I went through with our deal, then I was just as big a monster as it was. I stepped as stealthily as possible through the door, hoping no one would notice me sneak in. As I looked down at the face of the driver lying unconscious in his bed, I instantly felt the familiar sickness in my stomach. He was a boy. No older than Walter the night the Pastel Man and myself unfairly snuffed out his life before it truly had a chance to shine. Walter could have become someone different when he matured. Someone capable of doing really good things in this world, but he never was given the opportunity. This driver was just a stupid teenager who made a mistake. One that he'd never get the chance to atone for. I saw Walter in the boy's face, and my stomach began to churn more. I tried to call out the Pastel Man's name, but I couldn't. Perhaps that little angel on my shoulder wouldn't allow me. I would not be responsible for the death of another
just
boy.
Read it out. Be like,
not this time.
I hope this is good enough.
I refused to pull the trigger. I walked out of his room and didn't look back. I spent the rest of the evening sitting next to my son's bed. The first few rays of morning sunlight snuck into Matthew's hospital room and caught my attention. I peeked through the blinds and watched the sun rise for the first time since the night that Walter died. It was beautiful. The pink ribbon, the horizon, had bled into the sky, creating a dazzling purple hue. I had my light show, and it was spectacular. I broke my deal with the Pastel Man, and in doing so, my fate now rested in its filthy hands. Hands that it likely plans to bury into my abdomen. On the plus side, my son will recover in full. It'll be hard for him growing up without his parents, but he's always been close with his aunts. My wife's sister is a wonderful woman with a caring family. She's his legal godmother and promises us the day that he was born that she would always be there for him. Her husband does well for himself, and they've never had a problem with money. The life insurance policy Diana and I took out, combined with the money that we had been putting away for Matthew to go to college, will ensure that there should be no financial issues while he's under their care. It's only a matter of time before the pastel man comes from me. I have accepted that my death is near, but I'm not scared. In a way, I look forward to it. It's almost as if the boy that died within me on that terrible night has been given another chance. When I die, all the guilt and hate that I've had for myself dies with me.
Yeah, but then there's no coming back.
Wiped away so that my soul can
You're
cross
dead.
over to a new
You're
plane
dead.
of existence,
You're
pure and innocent,
no longer in the state of
the way it was
disease.
before I ever met that monster.
Deceased.
One must die, so another shall live. That's what the pastel man said.
God, 13, 13, 14, 14, 15, 15, 16, 16, 17, 17, 18, 18, 19. 25 years ago.
We'd all known Dennis had less than a week, and we'd all braced ourselves for all the good that would do. This was going to tear us apart and leave a ragged, gaping hole in all of our lives, but that would be it. It would fit within our understanding of things. We could all assume he went wherever we thought people go, and that would have been so much easier. Much less trouble than what actually happened. Dennis had been diagnosed with cancer a couple of days after his 10th birthday, and it was all downhill from there. There was never an upswing, never an opportunity for surgery. All the scans showed the same thing. The oily black webs having grown larger and denser. The fact that we were twins and we had looked identical right up to when he started chemo just made it worse. And there I was right beside him, perfect image of what he used to be before his hair fell out and his color drained and his cheeks sunk down into his skull. An emaciated ghost, constantly contrasted with what he should be. And then finally, the doctor shut the case, snuffed out the last wisps of hope. Dennis will most likely not last more than 4 days, a week at most. So we'd all set up camp in this musty room of the hospital. The walls were freckled and pea green. The only light slanted in from between shutters, glaring bars stretched out across the floor to end just short of Dennis's bed. The staff managed to bring in another, simpler bed for me, and my parents slept in old wicker chairs. Dennis looked really bad at this stage. You could as good as see his skull, and we all wanted to talk to him to make the most of whatever time was left, but he slept for most of the day, and when he woke up, there'd just be silence. Nobody knew what to say. There were no right words, and there was this underlying fear that the moment anybody interacted with the situation, they'd somehow make it real, and it would hit everyone. And the first sound would knock us all off the tightrope, and we'd all fall into tears and chaos. I wouldn't be able to pull ourselves back up, so there was silence. My parents forcing smiles that never made it to their eyes. The third day was when it finally happened. When the steady beeping of the heart monitor started to break down into frantic electric wails, and Dennis began to shake feebly as a dry crackling sound rose up from his mouth. My parents exploded out of their chairs. My mother heading straight to Dennis, grabbing his shoulders and pleading at him to stop it and be all right. My father was at the room door screaming down the hallways for help. The doctors and nurses at the hospital had changed lately. They'd started treating Dennis differently. Before The resuscitations were always these frantic, desperate efforts, like 100-meter sprints. There was a desperate desire to succeed in every single movement. Now it was different. More like a steady jog. These were people who were going through the motions, ticking off things they were meant to try from little checklists in their mind. I don't think it would have made a difference either way. The cancer had finally tipped over and his system just couldn't shoulder it anymore. They called it and left, offering their condolences and saying they'd take away the body when we were ready. The door clicked shut behind us. Me, Mom, Dad, and Dennis's corpse. We all inched closer, up to the side of his bed and just looked. My mother, cracked, breaking into great howling tears. My father pulled her close, trying to keep it together, but losing it in his own way. No sobs from him, just the occasional tear running down his face and sharp breaths bursting through his clenched teeth. I was just quietly staring at Dennis's face. We all stood there for a long time. I finally realized that this wasn't just one thing. This wasn't a single event. For the first time, my mind started running away with itself and unfolding all the endless implications of this, every one of them causing my gut to sink and for me to miss him so much, even though he'd just been there. I was never going to talk to him again. He was never going to laugh at me again. We were never eating dinner again. We were never going to school together again. We were never going to be in the same class at school again or talk during classes at school again. It just kept going on and going as I realized that this wasn't just one person I'd lost. It was a million things. Something that was meant to be this constant presence was gone, and nothing was ever going to be as good as it should be again. Everything I was going to do would be soured by the certainty that I wouldn't be doing it with him, or that I wouldn't be able to tell him about it later. It had only ever been a childish assumption that any of that would happen. I was the first to see his lips quiver. Mom, Dad, his lips are moving. My parents froze, still clasped against each other, my mom curled over and supported by my father. We looked down as his lips continued to quiver. My parents were quiet again. They must have been trying to hold back hope, assuming it was some kind of nervous tic, but it kept going, and finally, in a dusty, hoarse voice, so faint, it was like you were hearing it on the wind. He said my name. Harry. My father sprinted across the room, yelling for the nurses to come back. My mother was clutching her mouth and stumbled back from the bed. The workers tumbled back in and went through the checklist and shocked him with the defibrillators a few times and reached their verdict. We're sorry. He's still dead. But I heard him talk, said my father in a small pleading voice. Look, it could have been gas escaping. But, said my father before a tiny scraping sound cut through the room, everyone turning to its source. It was coming from Dennis, halfway between a sigh and a croak. Harry, it's so dark, so cold. So dark, and it's pulling down. Pulling at my insides, taking me down. A moment later, nurses started on their routes again, but this wasn't some pre-functionatory run through the checklist. You could see it on their faces in how hurried their movements were. They didn't know what was happening. They weren't even sure they were doing the right thing. They moved onto the defibrillator again, sending crashing waves of power down through Dennis's chest before listening with a stethoscope. Doesn't make sense. One was mumbling. After 10 minutes, they all stepped back. They'd run the checklist out. Nothing had happened. What's happening? My mother screamed. One of the men, a doctor, I think, answered. Nothing is happening. We try and pump in oxygen, and it does nothing. There's no pulse. We can't induce one for more than a few seconds or two. The body temperature's down 3 degrees. He's deceased. But we heard him, I said. I know, but he's dead. The dry grating came again, and everyone shut up.
Hi,
Please, Harry.
good.
Are you?
You're trying to save my life.
I walked over to his side. I wasn't relieved he was talking. I was only afraid. This was wrong. I wanted to run. I wanted him to just be gone so I could cry with my parents and be done with it. But I kept walking and put my hand on his bony, cold, and clearly dead hand.
Wait,
I'm here,
I
said.
How does that make any sense?
I can see gray.
I don't know.
A little bit of gray, but it's so far away. I don't just see it, I feel it. I feel it and know something could be so far away. I'm already so far down, but I need to go so much further to get to the gray. I don't know how to respond, so I just stood there and listened to him talk about the darkness and the distant gray smudge. Sometimes he'd answered me, sometimes he wouldn't. A lot of stuff happened around me in the next few hours. Everyone who worked at the hospital must have been in and out. Even my parents started to leave sometimes when they accepted. I was the only one Dennis seemed to be aware of. Dennis was looked at by every type of doctor they had in there, and no one understood. They started moving him around on a stretcher, taking him to the equipment they couldn't just bring to him. I had to come along. I was the only one who could keep him talking. It was a long time before anything was... They'd gotten desperate and put Dennis in an MRI machine. They'd fully prepped a corpse and put it in a machine for the living. My entire family was in the room. A cold, confused fear had settled in my gut, making me feel a little bit like throwing up. I think we've got something, said the technician who was looking at the monitor. Please just tell us what's happening, said my mother. She'd moved past terror and hope and was now, above all else, exhausted, her red face slack and empty. Look, this scan looks for where the blood is in the brain. Well, the thing is that none of the blood in the brain is moving. We know that from the pulse, but something is happening in there. Something the machine can only pick up a little, but there's some kind of activity. Now, I can't be sure, but I think the activity is clustered around some of the parts that control movement. Everything else is totally dead. He's obviously conscious. He's using complete sentences, but what? Said my father. But it's like whatever's doing the thinking is somewhere else, still interacting with the stuff that does the talking. That's exactly right, came a voice behind us. I looked over my shoulder and saw an old man in a gray business suit. He had a well-trimmed silver beard and was all around a strange contrast to the clumsy chaos that had engulfed the hospital. Who are you? Said the technician. I'm Daniel Cohens, he said, handing the technician a crisp business card. I'm with the Ophelius Institute. We're a semi-private medical research body, and we've dealt with a few cases similar to this one. The hospital president has already agreed to let us look into this. Almost invisibly, a number of men had moved in behind Cohen and was now making their way over to the technician. These men will help to explain the confidentiality situation surrounding issues like this. We'll handle the boy from here. More men. These ones in pure white scrubs that had a strange logo on the left breast got Dennis back on the stretcher and led us all into the hallway. We followed wordlessly, never thinking to say anything because at least these new people represented new possibilities, a completely new road that might lead to an explanation. They rolled Dennis into an operating theater and my mother gasped. Look, just what are you doing? Said my father in a husky voice that made it obvious he was still holding in tears. Cohens, who had been striding along the stretcher with a speed that belied his age, had stopped once we got into the theater, and was now taking deliberate care to look all three of us in the eye. We were still in the hallway, the operating theater door shut beside us. He answered in a low, comfortable tone. We are not performing surgery. It's just the quietest part of the hospital, and there are no distractions in there. We want nothing more than to understand what is happening to your son. This sort of thing has happened before. Your son is conscious, and, as we understand, he will only talk to his brother here. We want to use Harry to ask Dennis our questions. We believe this would work best if he and Harry were alone. We've got the theater wired so that we can hear the answers. My parents didn't say anything for a while. My father broke the silence with weak, staggered words. Do you think he might come back? I know that even if he does, it won't be for long. I'd really like him back. For however long. I didn't say enough. I wasn't big enough to say the things we had to say to each other. If such a thing is possible, I swear we will do everything in our power to make it happen. We've prepared a private waiting room for you two. Cohen's gestured down to the turn in the hallway. There were 2 people in white scrubs standing there. Pete and Shirley will lead you there, if you would please go with them. My parents began to shuffle down the corridor. My mother still buried in my father's side. My father kept throwing looks back over his shoulder at me, like he was afraid I'd vanish. Soon, they were gone, and I felt Cohen's hand come down on my shoulder. I turned around to talk to him, and he knelt down, so we were closer to being level. I know this is very hard on you. I know this must be the worst day of your life. But do you think you're up for a quick history lesson? I couldn't bring myself to answer properly, but some curiosity managed to rise through the delirium and shock. And I nodded. Cohen's smiled. One of the most significant moments of human history was the moon landing. And it's not even the fact itself that makes it so important. It's that we had contact with them the whole time they were up there. They were sending radio signals back to Earth and could be talked to. Do you think the moon landing would be what it was if we didn't have that kind of connection to our men, as I strode that unsettling and inhospitable surface of a place that we were never meant to have knowledge of? What if they'd just gone up and never came back? What if we knew for sure that they got there, had no signal from them? I was still quite out of it, so I couldn't say I was probably digesting all of this. I slid out, I don't know. They didn't know if they could get the astronauts back. It was a very real possibility that they'd be left to die up there, stranded. They still did. It didn't matter if the mission was a failure. It didn't matter if there was no triumphant return. You know what mattered? What mattered more than anything was speaking to them while they were up there. To 3 brave men in the void, describing man's first steps into the unknown. If they'd never come back, it wouldn't have changed anything, as long as we down here managed to make that connection to the beyond. As long as we down here, for however long, had men up there. Men to describe the soil. Men to explain the feeling of being so light. Men to tell us what the Earth looked like, cut in half by the lunar horizon. Men to teach us about a new world. His hand tightened on my shoulder. None of that would have been possible without the people in Houston. Without the men who talked to the astronauts, kept them focused, made sure we got the information we needed. Harry, we believe Dennis is in a very strange place that humanity would do well to learn about. You are Houston. Your brother is an astronaut. He pulled a laminated sheet out from under his lapel. Here's a sheet with some topics you should focus on, and questions you should ask. This should help you get the more useful and needed information, but the most important thing is to keep him talking. Stop talking for 5 seconds, and you could lose him. I accepted the card. Having given up on reaching a decent understanding of the situation, he ushered me into the theater and shut the door behind me. I was alone. The only sound, an almost inaudible ringing that emanated from the mass of stainless steel racks and implements, and the cold, sturdy operating table Dennis was lying on. I approached the table, and in need of any sort of guidance, I looked at the laminated sheet. General principles. Try to keep your loved one, the subject, unaware of their deceased state. Past experiences suggest that shock may cause disconnection. Do not ask leading questions such as whether your loved one, the subject, is having experiences in line with your own religious beliefs. Step 1. Ask your loved one, the subject, to describe their experiences and/or surroundings. Encourage them to be as... A gasp pulled my attention away from the sheet. Harry, Dennis said. Yeah, it's me, I answered, grabbing his hand. There was now no doubt that he really was Dad. The hand was ice cold, and the fingers had locked in place at odd angles with rigor mortis. His entire body had gone from sickly white of the dying to the rain cloud shade of the dead. I got to the gray, to the ground, came down easy, like a leaf, cold. I'm standing there now. Dennis, can you describe where you are? It's still gray, but it's more real now. Solid. Gray sand underneath. Gray ocean behind me. Gray clouds above. Don't remember going through the clouds, but they're there now. The clouds. They're screaming. An ocean? I said. Can you see anything in the ocean? Dennis took a phlegmy, pointless breath. Far away. The horizon. It gets dark. Dark, hungry line where even clouds stop, where everything stops. Darkness is clawing, moving like it. Miles and miles of angry, hungry dark. Can't go there. Can't go that way. At this point, I lost the thread of exchange as perspective suddenly hit. All the things I didn't understand, the fact that whatever Dennis was, he wasn't alive. I broke, crying and wailing and digging my face into his bare, emaciated ribs, cold like meat straight out of the fridge. I kept squeezing his hand harder and harder, pushing the stiff fingers closer together. Dennis, please come back. Whoever you are, just get back here. Harry, are you crying? It's hard to tell. So much is already sounds like crying. The word struck me deep enough to make my sobs catch in my throat, and I just started looking, settling back to my previous catatonic distance from what was happening. I can't come back. No getting back. Like spilling something on the ground. No getting it all back inside and right again. It took a few seconds to force myself to accept this, but I carried on, hoping that maybe I could steer him towards some sign that he was wrong. What's in the other direction, away from the ocean? That's the way I have to go. If I try and swim, the darkness will tear me up, shred away everything until only my pain is left, and it'll toss that into the clouds, and I'll scream. Dennis, tell me what's in the other direction. Just the sand. The gray sand. On and on. Not many bad things yet. Not many bad things to see yet. There'll be more when I get where I'm going. I'm going to start walking now, Harry. Where are you meant to be going? I said. I started digging my nails anxiously into my forearm. There was something nauseatingly, dreadfully true about everything he was saying. It was like the first time you learn the world is round, and it feels weird for a second, but soon you get used to the idea and you'll see it's the truth. That's the big secret. It doesn't matter how flat the ground feels. It doesn't matter how little sense it makes. It's true. And he just kept talking. I can see another person. Can you talk to them? I said, trying to keep my voice steady, feeling like I shouldn't be the one who couldn't keep it together. I suppose I could. But I can't. What do you mean? It's just a talking kind of place. We were supposed to have done all our talking before we came here. Now we should just keep quiet. But you're talking to me, Dennis. But my voice isn't here. My voice is all the way up there. With you. Dennis, I said, now squeezing my eyes to force the tears back. Dennis, please, tell me what's happening. I think I finally died. And what's happening now is what happens next. The thing that was always going to happen next. It feels right in a scary way. It's been expecting me for so long, since before I was even a fuzzy little thing that might happen. Since before our parents and their parents, and so far back, it's been expecting me. Please don't talk like that. You don't talk like that. You never have. Sorry, you just sort of see things different here. Some things you know without ever being told. Some things you forget. I couldn't think of anything to say and started to worry, remembering that if I left the pauses too long, he could stop answering. Hey, said Dennis, and the edges of his mouth strained out awkwardly, imitating a smile. I see a few more people, and they're all naked, but really naked. Their clothes are off, and they're all gray and wrinkly, but that's not it. You can see inside them. Like all the walls have fallen down, and you see who they are. All their thoughts and feelings. Just kind of hanging around them like ghosts. It's like someone's pulled the clothes off their whole past. They're naked, Harry. He made a light coughing sound that was meant to be a laugh. That's really scary. Oh, I thought you might have thought it was funny. I don't think we're gonna laugh at the same stuff anymore. I think you're different now. I guess that makes sense. So what are all the people doing? Most of them moving same direction as me, towards the center. Center of what? It's just called the center. The center of this place. Maybe the center of everything. But what? I said, starting to lose control. Why do you have to go? I don't have to. Nobody has to. Just like you don't have to stand when they put it out, or answer them when they talk to you. But it would feel wrong not to. It's what you're meant to do. And there's not any other good options. You don't want to stand still. What happens when you stand still? It depends. A few days ago, I passed this woman. A few days? I said, gripping the cold steel of the operating table as I was filled with an eerie sense of vertigo. You haven't been dead for even a day. I passed her a few days ago, he said, carrying on like he hadn't heard me. She didn't reach the center. She just sat down, started going her own way. She's pulled one side of her ribcage out and it's all stretched, spreading up to her left so high. Stretching out the arm, grabbing its corner. Most of her skin started to get hard and flaky like old wood or crumbling stone. I can see herself. Musician. Liked music, kind of thought of her life like a song. Sometimes it repeated itself, but bad notes here and there, but it was peeling itself. Together, she was reaching the chorus and it ended. It was over so fast she can't accept it. She's picked this sharp rock off the ground and she scraped it past her ribs like a huge harp or something. Angry. trying to make music, keep the song going, but it's an awful sound. Sawing bone and it never going to replace what should have come next. She's already grown into the ground. She's going to be here forever, trying to make the music she missed out on. There was nothing to say to that. So I just went quiet for a while, assuming he'd keep talking. He didn't. Dennis? Dennis! No answer. A terrified jolt ran through me and I started slamming my fist onto his chest. Dennis! Come back! Dennis! A growl tore out of his mouth and his frame thrashed upwards, causing me to jump back and tumble onto the floor, smashing into surgeon shelves and causing gleaming surgical instruments to rain down around me. I didn't have time to think before I'd forced myself up again and bent over the operating table to stare desperately into my brother's eyes. I took his hand again, squeezing it as hard as I could. Harry, he said, and relief flooded through me. It's been so long. So long. It's been years. What? I've been walking for years. Years and years, and it keeps getting worse. It hasn't been years. It's been so many years, and everything keeps getting worse. What? What's worse? It gets worse. Close enter. There's so many people now, thousands. Tens of thousands. They're all walking to the center. But what's so terrible? There's more. So many more, like the girl with the harp I told you about. Stuck in place, trying to fix what happened. Angry about what happened. Rooted to the ground, moaning, calling out names of the people they think did this to them. Sometimes a few join up, and when they get all hard and crackly like the old statues, they start to grow together, start to feel each other's pain. Sometimes there's mountains of them, entire landscapes of people crying about how unfair it is. I'm still walking. Where are you going? I told you, the center. I'm getting close now. All of the clouds with their screaming faces and curving. All curving. And being pulled in the same direction, twisting their way into the center. Please. Please stop walking and come back. Can't. No coming back. Besides, I have moving like everyone else. Doing something weird. It's the quickest way for the walkers to notice you. Oh God. Oh God. Where are the walkers? Started seeing them more as I got towards the center. They're all
Won't stay still for this. Well, John did it now. Oh,